Hey yo, it's the Life Shot Podcast. Change your world and change the world.
This is Life Shot Podcast. Today we've got Jon Nicholson with us. Jon is from the original gym. And when I looked at your about page, Jon, I saw a whole lot of things going on there. Jiu-jitsu, fighting, MMA, and you've done psychology at school or at university. But welcome to the Life Shot.
Cool, glad to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jon. So today we're going to talk about some things that off camera we've been talking about, these exciting things about the body and the mind and being in sync. And I think it's some really exciting stuff that our listeners are going to just like, what? I can't believe it. That's awesome. And so let's dive in. So tell us about yourself and also about like the original gym. Where'd the name come from? How did you start it? Just give us a bit of background about, Jon.
Okay. That's kind of two questions. The first one is a fairly kind of longish history. Lots of things along the way. So I guess where I'd start things is I started some martial arts quite a long time ago. It's kind of over a decade ago now. And tried a few different martial arts. Ended up doing some MMA, which is really good. Like mixed martial arts, it's like the thing. And when I was learning that, I kind of found it was like a big problem for me. I felt really kind of, I was weak, I was uncoordinated, couldn't kind of move well, and I just felt like I wasn't really, making progress. I was really struggling. So I started kind of looking into things to like how can I move better, and these kind of movements and grapplers and stuff.
Was this like in the early 2000s or where was this?
I'm going to say this is early 2000s, yeah, very early 2000s. So I started looking at kind of things of how grapplers should move better, this kind of stuff. And it was one kind of accident, really big accident. I kind of heard someone say, you need like a good awareness of your movement or control of your movement or something like this. And that was early days of the internet. So I went to Google and I was just searching for all these things, and I came across this like awareness through movement. And I kind of completely got it wrong, actually. That I thought what I was looking for was awareness of movement. So I wanted to develop like the ability to learn how to move my body. And it turned out to be something kind of a lot bigger. But that kind of got me into things. I was looking at kettlebells and very early, I went to like the first CrossFit. And people doing like pistols and all this kind of stuff, and bodyweight conditioning. So that's what I was looking at then. I kind of bounced around with some stuff. I had a lot of injuries, and so I had a surgery on my shoulder, all these kind of things. So I was looking.
Where did the injury come from?
From grappling, from martial arts. Yeah, you kind of get thrown around. I mean, jiu-jitsu, for example, you're trying to break the body. I mean, that's what it is. You take a joint and you try and snap it the wrong way. It's a lot of fun. You're playing around.
So someone got you.
Things go wrong. Yeah, they do. That's part of it. It's a high risk, high reward. Things went wrong a few times. I think looking back, I know that I had kind of predispositions. Like my kind of posture was terrible. So it was kind of waiting to happen sooner or later because I was moving really badly. I'd done other sports before, but I was riding a bike, so BMXing actually was kind of what I was doing before that. It's great, it's a lot of fun, and I was moving, but it's a very limited kind of thing. You're holding onto these handlebars all the time, and your shoulders are really forward, your upper back's really rounded. It's not a very kind of well-rounded way of moving.
So even doing the grappling, your body wasn't able to cope with. You felt like you couldn't move properly, even though you.
Yeah, grappling. Just even learning movements. It's this old thing. Like, some people are like natural athletes. Like we call them natural athletes. There's just that kid that can like, pick up any sport and play it well, and we think they're natural athletes. And to me, I didn't kind of like the idea that I was an unnatural athlete or that kind of a thing. I thought you got to figure this out. You got to be able to learn to do this to become a natural athlete. And it's sort of a funny thing. Now I go and do things and people are like, but you're a natural athlete. I've literally had people say that, and I don't think it's true.
So in your childhood, maybe you weren't doing sport, or were you?
No, not particularly. Not particularly until I kind of teenage. When I was in my teens, I kind of took up BMX. But like I said, it's not a very kind of well-rounded thing. in terms of the movement. It's a lot of fun and all this kind of stuff. It's great. But you do get injured doing that as well, fairly obviously. But the big kind of thing, I guess, is very limited. You're holding a handlebar and you've got your feet on some pedals. There's not that much you're moving your body, and then you go to something like grappling.
That's a next level movement.
Yeah, and you're really moving your body all over. You're having it cranked on and twisted, and all this kind of stuff. I'm not a particularly big guy, and I was kind of a beginner thrown in with the sharks a little bit. And yeah, it wasn't up to scratch. So I was like, I've got to kind of fix this. So, I've kind of quickly picked up that physical conditioning was something I needed to really do.
So we're going to get onto that a bit later with the Feldenkrais thing about how you also try to heal your body, right?
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
Before we get onto that though, tell me about this name, right? Original Gym.
Okay. So the Original Gym. Okay. So from there, we kind of fast forward a little bit. Well, there's some other things. So I was looking at physical conditioning. The MMA turned into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the real Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I was kind of just more and more interested in the mind and the body, all this kind of stuff, doing what I'm doing, my training. I decided that I just needed a break. It changed my life essentially. A break from kind of career and this kind of stuff.
Were you fighting as almost like a professional? You were an amateur fighter, but
amateur. Yeah, amateur.
But it was your full-time thing.
Semi-professional. No, I had a career. I had a day job. I had like a conventional, 9-to-5 job. And I was just kind of more and more interested in this stuff, and just I realized, I'm spending 40 hours a week doing something that I just don't care about, and it's kind of a waste of time, really. I mean, it gives you money, and money can do things, but
it's not what you're really passionate about.
It's just a waste of time, really. So, and there were some things like the kind of things to do with funding and education in the UK were changing. So I was like, do you know what? I should, while it's financially a little bit more viable, I'll go and do a degree. Like I'll just blank slate, clear everything.
So you weren't just fresh out of school, yeah? You're doing.
Yeah, I'd had like a corporate career. Yeah, for nearly a decade. So I decided to go back to uni, do a degree in psychology, which I think is a really important subject. It wasn't very kind of a directed thing that I wanted to be a psychologist or this kind of thing. I just wanted to understand, really.
Understand the mind.
Yeah, exactly. And it was something I wanted to do for myself, and I knew I could kind of apply everywhere. So funding for that, I'm like, well, I'm spending a lot of time learning about, this kind of strength and conditioning stuff. I'll train as a personal trainer, so I qualified as a personal trainer so that I could earn some income while studying. So I was going from like full-time income to very, very part-time income. I ended up working in the university gym, which is great. Like, it was a really great life. It was right next to the library, so I was studying, and then going to the gym and either working or training and just kind of living that life, training jiu-jitsu at night. Kind of doing that for a few years. And then,
did you have a social life?
Well, you say that, it's a very social thing. Like, these things are very social things.
Yeah.
So but not really in the conventional sense. No, I didn't do the whole like uni kind of whatever kind of thing. I missed that boat. But what so anyway, I was working in the gym at the university, which was really good, big learning experience. I was like going from sweeping the floor to delivering PT sessions, gym inductions. So it was like right at the bottom kind of rung of the ladder. But learned a lot. I've just watched a lot what kind of goes on in gyms over the course of a couple of years.
These are mostly students when they weren't paying you as a personal trainer, but they were just, the university paid you or something?
Yeah, the university paid me, but they delivered personal training as well, which was mainly to lecturers. So there were lecturers and staff using the gym as well. So it wasn't just students. But I kind of saw what was going on a lot there. And then anyway, get to graduation, and it was kind of a coincidence. When I graduated, an opportunity came up to rent a space, like a room like this. It was the other side of town. And I kind of thought about Amdenard, and I was like, and I'd done some other work in a kind of commercial gym as well, one of the big chain gyms. And I was like horrific. And one of the things I kind of realized was I want my own thing, my own space, so that I can kind of really set the tone, set the environment, and kind of clear everything out. So the gym's very minimalist. It doesn't look like a chain gym. We've got all this, I say all this, it's a very minimal amount of equipment, but it's kind of stuff.
But stuff you don't normally see.
Stuff you don't normally see anymore.
Like rings, which you've shown.
Yeah, rings, wall bars. Very weightlifting equipment. A couple of minimalist squat racks and bars, plates. Very the horses, the gymnastics benches. Really very minimal, very very minimal equipment. And it was funny because for me, when I was studying my psychology degree, it was kind of a real pain in the ass. Actually, there was I think the neuropsychology part of the library, the bookshelf, was right next to the sports science section. So I kind of read as much sports science as I did psychology in the end. And now these old Russian books, right? And they had everything, and it was just I kind of really saw like how they were using like this old gymnastics stuff. Like guys doing back extensions over benches and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, with a bit of creativity, you don't need all this nonsense that's in gyms. You don't need it, and it really it's just a kind of a wrong approach. So anyway, I got my own space. I start putting equipment in, and a couple of people who just poked their head through the door were like, "Oh man, it's like the old school gym," and I was kind of like, "Old school gym" and this kind of thing. And there were some other influences as well. But one thing was there was a kind of a really old Paul Chek interview. He's kind of a famous fitness industry kind of guy, really interesting guy. And I read this interview with him, and it was really interesting. He was talking about the original bodybuilders and what they were doing. It's kind of 1920s, maybe earlier than that. It was a spiritual pursuit. So they weren't just building the body; they were building the mind and the soul. And there's this whole kind of physical culture thing, and that kind of just stuck in my mind. And then, it just came out. This is the original gym. It was kind of a bit funny, really. I like a bit of comedy with what I'm doing, or a sense of humor, anyway. It's something that can be as deep as you like it to be. But this whole kind of Paul Chek thing, which was just very very funny.
Before I forget, when we were talking off camera, and you mentioned that thing about Bruce Lee. And you mentioned the 3 things for... This is a big thing. One of my... there was another thing that kind of really stuck in my mind. It was... so it was from a Bruce Lee thing. He said... he was talking about martial arts. And he said, your martial arts should have 3 major kind of areas of benefit. And the first one is practical. So in martial art, you should learn how to defend yourself. Like self-defense. Like, if you're doing a martial art and you can't defend yourself, you probably weren't doing a martial art, right? Or you're doing something else, or something wrong. Second aspect is it should be good for your health. Now, you train a lot of martial arts, that can kind of run into some problems like injuries, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. But basically it's really good for your health. And then the third kind of dimension he talks about is self-development. So you can train and you use this as a vehicle for self-development. And what's that book? Zen and the Art of Archery, right? It's not a very kind of true Zen text, but it talks about this simple thing which is archery and how you can use this as an activity for self-development. And it kind of mentions that you can use anything. Like you could be knitting and use that as a form of self-development or a spiritual pursuit. So for me, it's like, well, you want to do something for your health, or you want to go to the gym, make it tick these 3 boxes. Like again, if you're going to the gym and okay, maybe you pump your muscles up a little bit, maybe this kind of thing. But if you can't jump over a fence or get up from the floor or sprint down the end of the road, your back gets hurt.
Your back's out. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's a classic one. Yeah. If you go to the gym and you got nothing to show for it, or no sort of physical abilities to show for it, you can't operate practically. You did the wrong thing.
So you're not ticking that first box.
Yeah, exactly. And you can look at, say, looking at someone a little bit older. One of the most important things they can learn is things like getting up and down from the floor. Now it sounds ridiculous, but how do you get up and down from the floor? If you trip, if you fall, that's a really, really big thing for someone who's a little bit older. If you're a little bit younger, you need to be able to move. You need to be able to do things. Like, someone has a heart attack, and you need to run to the end of the street and get a defibrillator or something like
so
this.
So it's being like big muscular, but you can't run.
It's one-dimensional. It's one-dimensional, and that's kind of another thing. Same thing. Like, you might be able to run a marathon, but if you can't, climb a tree or something, it's not going to help you. Or it's very kind of one-dimensional, I would say. So there should be a practical. You should develop practical abilities when you're training. And obviously, the second thing is your health. And the health thing, I think, with the conventional notion of exercise is, again, I think there's a big thing in the West. We're very kind of number oriented. So, people have got these recommendations, these ideas. I need to do, 3 times 20 minutes of cardiovascular exercise for my heart, or this kind of thing. And it's just really myopic. It's like, you've plucked out this one number and you've hammered it. And, you see people going running and they're like, yeah, but you screwed up your knees and you screwed up your back and you can't do a pull-up.
So your health is not really generally well. It might be well in certain areas.
Yeah,
but
you've taken one metric and you've improved that, but you kind of missed everything else. Or you look at I don't know, someone who's lifted a lot of weights and they can't touch their toes, or this kind of thing. That's like they just had like a singular kind of focus and they've not zoomed out and looked at a bigger picture. And the health problems, I think, are beyond. There's musculoskeletal health problems. So you see people doing certain forms of exercises and they come with the same injuries. And that's or kind of degradation over time. I said cycling's great. It's a good way to get from A to B. But if you sit at a desk all day and you're kind of hunched over like this, and you think, I'm going to do something about this, and you're going to sit like this for another couple of hours, you're not really doing the right thing, I would say. Don't get me wrong, riding a bike's great, but again, you need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture for your musculoskeletal health. And then like metabolic health as well. So, you see people, especially like doing tons of either like really high intensity or, which is very popular, or, like marathon running, this kind of stuff. And you combine that with kind of chronic dieting, and there are kind of health issues that can come with that down the road. So
that's putting a big strain on the body at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're not kind of balancing things out very, very well there. And then you talk about psychological health. That's another kind of whole can of worms. But then Bruce Lee's third model is the self-development thing. And that's the same thing. It's like get into the gym or not the gym. Gym's just one place. It's used as a vehicle for self-development. And this is where I kind of really decided to do what I'm doing, for now anyway, was in my psychology degree. We were studying psychological therapies. We were looking at kind of all these, there was kind of a load of lessons that you can learn essentially that are very, very good for one's psychological health. And I kind of realized I was like, most of these things you can learn through physical training. Like one of the big things is this idea of like growth mindset. Right? So there's a Harvard psychologist, Carol Dweck, wrote a very good book, Self Theories, and it's this idea that we have a theory about ourselves, right? That we then kind of enact, or we're limited by, essentially. So she would talk about some kid who, you go to school and you got maths, for example, and the kid's good at maths, it can do it. So it just goes, oh, I'm good at maths. And as it keeps progressing through school, keeps being really good at maths, and it doesn't do its homework ever. So they don't do their homework, and they build up this self-image of I'm good at maths, right? And there's no kind of rhyme or reason why, they're just good at it. And they're like, okay, whatever. And then they hit a point all of a sudden where it gets hard, right? And how do you react to this sudden change? All of a sudden it's difficult. And what happens with some people is they build a story of like, well, I was given this ability of being good at maths that, I didn't work for it, just came out of the sky. And now I've used it up. So it's like you were born with a fixed amount of mathematical ability and you were good, and then you stopped, you hit your ceiling and you're done. And you never learn to like study and improve. So this idea that you're a fixed quantity. And this is kind of this self-story, this narrative. I hear it, it's a little different thing, but age is the same kind of thing. There's like people build this self-story.
So this is thinking about something now. I'm in my early 40s.
Yeah.
And I used to be very flexible, and I used to move a lot in my, actually in my childhood, and even in my 20s I could do stuff, and then I stopped training, right? And then I couldn't do it. And I thought I would never be able to do that stuff again. But as I'm doing this stuff that you're talking about, I find that my body can do it again. So I limited myself thinking I'm too old.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, people have, and it doesn't matter what the story is. There's lots of stories. I'm just not good at this. Well, did you try? And if you go into something with the attitude that you're not going to be able to do it, well, why bother trying? Like, you shouldn't even try, right? I'm weak, I'm this, I'm that. Physical training should be a kind of real vehicle to teach that, because it's fairly simple. Like, you pick up 1 kilogram, right? If you pick up 1 kilogram enough times, guess what? You can pick up 2 kilogram. Like, it just works. And that's like, it's a very simple kind of message in that, which is like, well, there was a thing that was impossible. You couldn't pick up 2 kilogram, but you did some work and now you can. And that's like this idea of growth mindset. It's a very simple, embodied, physical way of teaching that concept that you learn. You're like, well, shit, I couldn't do this thing and now I can. There's lots of other things like this. Anything. Juggling is a great example. Juggling or the handstand, actually. Two things
I tried
that
to juggle
very...
3 balls. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm saying I can't do it, right? But I probably can. But just need to practice, right?
Well, yes and no. Yeah, it's kind of, yes, it's as simple as that, but it's kind of more complicated than that. Juggling, for example. If you take 3 balls and you try and juggle, it's probably going to be pretty hard. You're probably going to give up fairly quickly. Because it's not a process. And if you break it down into parts, with juggling, you'd start with 1 ball, and you just learn to throw the ball between one hand and the other, like get a really smooth arc. And again, you practice, you do repetitions until you've got that really perfect. And then you introduce a 2nd ball and you throw from one hand, and as a timing, you throw the 2nd ball, da-dum, 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 and you practice that. And again, it's built off the first skill. So if you get that wrong, it's probably because you didn't practice the first one enough. You go back, practice, da-dum. Then from there, once you can do 2 balls perfectly, you add a 3rd ball, there's a bit of timing, boom, you're going and you can juggle. And you've taken something that seemed impossible. I mean, it's impossible, right? And then you break it down into steps and you put in work, and you've got to have a process, you've got to understand it, you've got to have broken it down, and it helps to,
And you've got to be motivated to do it.
You've got to be motivated to do it. And then all of a sudden, within whatever your time frame is, you can do something that was previously impossible. And that for me is like, this is your life lesson, and this is what you should be taking and applying elsewhere. And I've had people say, since training with me, they look at things differently. And that's what I kind of fundamentally believe is, there are limits, right? I can't fly yet.
Yeah.
But try. You should be able to, any kind of problem, you see it as just a problem, right? It's not a big problem, it's just a problem. Problems can be solved, right? You've got to break it down into parts, practice, continue, and it's a very, very big thing. And that kind of growth mindset then has, huge impacts on one's psychological health. Problems at work, all these kind of things. You see the world as full of possibility rather than this impossible kind of thing. So that's kind of where one of the areas where the kind of psychology influenced my choice to do this, and that essentially. Physical training has big cognitive and emotional kind of components and benefits. But again, only if you do it a certain way. So you have to kind of have that stuff in mind in order to kind of choose your activities correctly. And again, I think a lot of people, what they're doing doesn't really teach them that, because they're doing kind of the same stuff over and over, and it's very limited. And then we kind of run into problems.
Jon, I'm intrigued by the movement, the motion thing, the awareness. Loving the rings, by the way. It's like, I wish I had it in my house, right?
Yeah.
Hanging around.
So they're a cool thing.
I was looking at the about page on your original gym website, and you mentioned somebody called Moshe Feldenkrais, and he talks about movement and awareness. I thought, what? I've never even heard of that.
Okay. This is a big kind of thing. So. Like I said, it was kind of an accident that I came across his work, and I was looking for awareness of movement, right? Which is a really big thing, and it does kind of develop that. But there's a much bigger thing beyond that, and this kind of goes back to a lot of psychology, essentially. Actually goes back to kind of guys like William James, who's like 1891, and they're talking about this idea that all of our thoughts, emotions, and thinking are rooted in the body. Right, and therefore, if you kind of believe that, then actually working with the body is the best way of working with the mind. So, for example, a really kind of simple example. Feldenkrais is very. Some of his early work, he was writing all this stuff, and it was about the 1940s when he wrote his stuff. Again, interesting guy. He was one of the first judo black belts. It was European. So he kind of looked at judo. He looked at baby development. He looked at psychology. He was engineered by trade, so he kind of really looked at the body from an engineering perspective. And his big kind of thesis was essentially that if you're not addressing the body in like psychotherapy, so one of his books was really kind of a critique of Freud. And he said if you're not addressing the body, then you're not going to change someone, because our whole kind of self-identity, our thoughts and emotions are embedded in the body. So you might do some talking kind of therapeutic work and someone feels better, but the minute they get up from the couch, which is the one thing he said Freud got right, they go back into their body pattern, and all of their all of their kind of problems come back because it's associated with how they're holding their body. And it's kind of it's a really interesting idea, and it goes way back. You can look at old the very early the real yoga, the early yoga texts. This was a big thing.
It's almost like we've lost that connection to the body. Do you think in our industrial age, or
this is absolutely, if you ask me, like the one I would say the one kind of biggest thing that I believe in, and this is that what we need to do is reconnect, and this idea of connection is I think a very powerful idea, that people aren't connected to their bodies. That they just can't. They're not feeling.
Someone might say, "But I'm in my body." What are you talking about?
Yeah. They're in their body, but they don't feel it. There was a time recently I was at a train station, so having coffee, waiting for a train. I was looking at people walking, and what's really interesting is like you look at a crowd of people, and how many people are like hobbling, and it's like they're dragging their legs along, and I'm looking, or like bodybuilders in a gym, they've pumped themselves up, and it just looks uncomfortable. It looks like they're wearing really, like I hate wearing like a suit and a tie and this kind of stuff. It just kills me. You can't move. No, really. And like the people are living in uncomfortable bodies, right? You might have expensive clothes, but your body just looks really uncomfortable. Yeah. So people are they're in these kind of uncomfortable bodies, I think, and I think that's because they're disconnected from them. Same thing with, for example, food, nutrition, this kind of thing. I think people don't know, what's kind of good and bad for them. They don't have a good felt sense. And you can go and look at the psychology literature. Psychology literature is really interesting thing is a thing called interoception, which is our sense of ourself. So our physical self, right? So the classic way of measuring this is how accurate you are at sensing your own heart rate, right? So some people have got a very good sense. They can just feel, my heart rate, boom, 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 like this. And other people, their sense of it
without even touching it.
Without touching, just a kind of internal feeling, right? And it's kind of a measure of one's interoceptive ability. And you find that people with, there are big correlations with greater interoceptive ability and lower interoceptive ability. With a big one is eating disorders, and that's both being very, very overweight and very underweight, is that people don't have a good, that it's the same kind of thing, a feeling for how much should they be eating. Like they're just disconnected from this kind of idea.
I've heard some people don't feel full, and I can't even relate to that, because when I eat a meal, I'll feel full afterwards, I feel full. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's the same kind of idea.
Yeah.
And actually, and you get the same thing emotionally. So one of the ideas is that our body is like a theater for our emotions, right? So when you experience an emotion, it's like it's played out in your body, and then that's something you're supposed to pay attention to. And we can see this a lot in the way people talk, the way people move. They put the hand on the chest a lot when they're saying one thing. That's kind of a big thing, is the emotion in the body.
So are there techniques to connect back to our body, or is there nothing you can put your finger on? Or
in terms of techniques, it's more of an approach than a technique, I would say. So one of the big things is to simply is essentially to kind of meditate upon the body, right? It sounds kind of like a wacky concept. But a really simple thing to do. There's an exercise a lot of meditation teachers teach. And the idea of this exercise, you take like a raisin and you chew on it. and you chew and you chew, and you just pay attention to it. And
you don't
anytime
swallow it, you just keep it in your mouth.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when your mind wanders off, you come back to it and you keep chewing. And there's a very similar exercise actually that people use when they're teaching creative writing, where you take a simple act like, I don't know, lighting a candle is the classic one, and you have to write. They say, right, you've got to write 4 pages on lighting a candle, and instead of like, well, you think like, I lit the candle, right? That's 4 words. That's someone who, you know, oh, I live in my body, as opposed to, right, I pick up the match and I feel its, you know, the wooden texture. I lift it from the box, and like you could write all day about it, right? You know, the noise of the thing brushing against the thing and it's sparking and blah blah blah. And the idea of it is, it's a very simple kind of idea. It's about depth, right? So you can take a very very simple thing, and you just try and feel deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And it's kind of a process I teach with this. You know, you could take, you know, a simple example, lie on the floor and take a very simple movement like rolling an arm or a leg or something like this, and just pay attention and just keep doing it and keep doing it until you feel kind of more and more layers. You know, you feel kind of ripples through the body. So I would kind of cue you through this process.
Is this something you do at this gym, or do you tell people to do it at home?
It's a process that I would teach. It's a process that I would teach, but it's kind of, once you've done it once, it's kind of more of an idea that should then apply in general. You know, as an exercise, very very useful. And you know, there's kind of quite a lot. There's more to it than I'm kind of saying. But it's a very kind of good place to start with this idea of, you know, connecting, feeling your skeleton. You can do a very simple movement, and you're like, oh, okay, which muscles can I feel doing this? You know, can I feel my skin moving, and can I feel that moving against my clothes, my weight shifting? You know, I'm moving my wrist. Do I hold my breath? You know, do I shift my weight around? You know, do I feel some other kind of something else going on?
So that's the way to connect back.
Yeah, exactly, and it's just becoming more connected to your body, to your musculoskeletal system. There's other things as well. There are meditations where you know, pay attention to your heart rate, to your breathing, all this kind of stuff. So it's a very very big topic. And there are some kind of things that I like. There are things that are very ancient practices that go back, you know, a long long way. There are things that, you know, the contemporary neuroscience. So yeah, I spend a lot of time looking at, you know, what's going on in the research.
Do you find that these ancient traditions and ways of doing things are almost, science is explaining that now, like, oh, this is what's actually happening when you do those type of things?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, yeah, for sure, 100%. You know, it's kind of a very, very big question, that.
So it's almost, science is taking us away from this voodoo kind of spiritual thing and saying, hey, this is actually real stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
which is
for
quite
sure,
comforting for people, because if they want to break out and connect back, they don't have to think, well, I have to get all wacky, weird, you know, religious. It's science.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You know, science is one thing to look at, right? It's not the only thing to look at.
Yeah.
You know, there's still, you know, it's a process, and it's kind of a
the scientists are still learning about.
Yeah, they're learning new things, and they'll go off down kind of dead alleyways and kind of da, and then, you know, the tide of evidence changes. You know, this kind of thing. So it's definitely something to look at. But you know, you can look at all this stuff in a much simpler way. Is you know, we want to move. Right, like it's a very. I think we've got an innate drive to move. You know, I always think. You know, even okay, maybe some people have really lost it, but you know, a lot of people, you put them in the right kind of situation, and they want to move. Like people going out on a Friday night, right? In the UK, people go out to clubs and they dance, right? And it's like, okay, maybe they drink a little bit or whatever, and you know, that's the thing, and you know, it takes that kind of shift in you know, kind of what's going on in your brain to get people to dance. But why is that there? I think there is some kind of innate drive that people have to want to move. Like, people do want to play sports, they do want to go to run and move around, all this kind of stuff. I think what's happened is it's just because of the way our society is now.
There's not that many opportunities.
There's so many opportunities, or they're kind of formal, or the fun has been taken out of it.
Yeah.
You know, sports can be very competitive. Or, you know, I think the gym in general, you know, a lot of people aren't into the gym. Like I think in a sense that the whole kind of gym fitness industry thing is kind of a failure, really. Because
so let's talk about that, because I wanted to ask you, why do some people?
Can I just stop saying? Can I just go and check something?
Yeah. Yep.
3, 2, 1, go.
So John, I want to ask, people go to gym,
Yeah.
and they might go for like 3 months. I think that's the 3-month thing is the thing, all right? And then people like drop off.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see it in this gym as well, but normal gyms. Why do you think that's happening? How do we stay motivated?
What I would do, I would question the original motivation, right? And if people kind of start doing something and stop doing it, well, they didn't really want to do it, right? That's the kind of honest answer, is they didn't really want to do it, right? If something you really want to do something, you'll do it. You'll find a way. And I think so. Those motivations are ones that I think are kind of shallow, and they're not really, I don't see as so sustainable. If people, I don't know, want to lose weight or look good or this kind of thing, or maybe they've hit a realization that I need to do something for my health. You're doing something for something else, right? You're not doing it for its own sake. And then like people in the fitness industry are like the last people on earth to ask about this. All the fucking motivational memes and stuff that they shared. They want to be there, right? they I don't know why. They just love lifting some weights and doing whatever and going for a run. So they're kind of the last people to ask. I think from this kind of thing that the fitness industry is a big failure, essentially, in that you've got a load of people who aren't interested in it, and from every kind of part of the spectrum. So if you can actually move, right? If you're a decent mover, you're not going to go to the gym and do that nonsense. You're going to be dancing, doing some parkour, doing a martial art. You're going to be doing something where you're really moving, right? An idea of going into a gym and getting on a treadmill and doing some bicep curls is like, you just think it's nonsense. So like for good movers, they just look at this thing and it's just kind of dumb. It's like, and I see it. You see like, I don't know, people who can move well and they're ex-athletes, this kind of stuff, and they didn't quite make it, whatever, and they're like, in the fitness industry you can be king. If you can do some elementary gymnastics, you look like the messiah in the fitness industry. And then so it fails those people. And then equally it fails kind of more ordinary people or people with injuries, this kind of stuff. I think they're kind of failed by it as well. And I think a big thing, it goes back to the self-development aspect. That they're not engaging in the process, right? So they don't want to do it because it's not interesting, and you're not learning anything. It's kind of like a form of self-punishment or something like this that only lasts so long. Really, if all you want to do is, I don't know, lose weight for a wedding or something like that, I don't know, don't come to me. Like it's not what I do. Yeah.
So you find that people who come to you, this style of gym, the longevity of their commitment is, you think it's quite long?
Yeah, on average, yeah. I would say, I have people who come and they do a little bit and they don't come back and whatever. Maybe it's not for them. What I do isn't for everyone. They're maybe not in the same place as me, or someone to come here, for whatever reason. That is what it is. But I've got a lot of people who've been with me for a very long time, and realise the kind of journey. Again, if you've got a process, it's endless, right? And that's not to say, I'm going to keep taking your money forever or that kind of thing. It's not about that. It's you're engaging in a process where you're constantly learning things. There's always refinement to be made. You're learning new things. You hit a roadblock, you can't do this thing. We work around it. You learn something new. If you've got a kind of movement perspective, there's like so much to learn. Like you will never sort of you'll never run out of things to do. And this is where kind of fitness is like this really small kind of thing. It's like a little drop in the ocean of movement. It's such a bigger picture. For me, again, going back to Ido's work, some of the things I've absolutely loved is, for me, what I like finding is I like finding something that I can't do, something that I'm rubbish at. Because to me, it's like, okay, well, this is a thing I can improve. So I can't do this thing. Maybe it's my ego as well. Maybe I feel shitty that I can't do something, right? I'm a fairly competitive kind of person. If I can't do X, well, that's something that I can improve. And if I improve that thing, well, as a byproduct, I get all these other kind of benefits. So, one of the things, he kind of, talks about a lot is, looking at the dance world, for example. Now, for me, I've done a lot of martial arts, but going to dance is very interesting because it's very, very similar. There's a lot of common threads between the two. Working with a partner and pushing and pulling, this kind of stuff. But yeah, being made to feel like, really uncoordinated and not being able to time yourself
and timing,
and this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just really interesting. There are worse dancers than me out there, but it's an interesting kind of thing. So like these kind of bigger picture of movement. Again, was working in conventional gyms. Look around and I'd see people who've been going there for years. Been going to the same gym, doing the same stuff for years. And I would say, well, let's take you out of here and see what's the product of this. So, go and dance and like, how do you get on? Now, if all you've been doing is like workouts on a rowing machine, and all of a sudden you've got to do something different, you're maybe not going to do so well. Go rock climbing, go swim, go do all these other things. It's like a big, huge world of movement, and the body, like there are so many articulations and joints and all this kind of stuff. There's so much to learn. That kind of thing is just like like really small.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I
find that when I might play touch rugby just once in a while, and the next day I'm like, oh, I didn't know I had that muscle.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. There's what I would say is there's a difference between there is a thing of kind of getting the depth of things right, and that's kind of a tricky question. And for me, I suppose what's a product of a lot of work, and again, guys like the guy for this really, is kind of bringing these disparate things together and kind of seeing the connections between them and making some kind of coherent kind of thing. So a lot of people, what they're doing, they'll maybe, lift some weights on a Monday, go for a run on a Tuesday, and do some yoga on a Wednesday, and that's good. That's a better approach than only doing one of those things. But again, for me, it's like I've got a different purpose. So the choices that I might make within within kind of one area are informed by like a bigger picture and like kind of connections to other things, if that makes sense.
So let's move on to the nutrition now, because I want to think, if somebody is interested in your type of workout, let's say someone's like, I'd like to be more flexible, more mobile. I want my body to last longer into my 50s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
So that when I'm 60 and I don't trip over and break my hip and then die or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So they're interested in this type of thing. What do you suggest, or maybe you don't have suggestions, you let me know, about diets and nutrition?
Okay, so it's really, really important. Like, it's obviously, I would go beyond nutrition. I would say, again, nutrition is just part of, nutrition and movement are part of a kind of a bigger thing, which is our lifestyle, I guess. And again, nutrition is a really kind of, similar to fitness in a way. It's a very kind of tricky area in the nutrition world, especially just with books in the shops and the internet, this kind of thing. It's very tribal. We spoke about like you mentioned like keto or vegan and this kind of stuff, and these are kind of like very tribal kind of things.
Because they're trying to build an industry around that, maybe.
I think that's a big thing. Looking at it from a kind of psychological perspective, diet is something that people might use to construct their identity. It's like, I'm a this or I'm a that. And it's very common to see certain kinds of exercise go hand in hand with certain kinds of diet. Like, it's very popular. There are some kind of popular connections there. But as opposed to kind of where to start with nutrition, I think the kind of, we can go, there are details, right? Same in everything. But I think the big places to start, I think there are 2 or 3 big kind of picture things that I would look at as starting places for how you're going to eat. One of the first things would be essentially what I would call, like ancestral or evolutionary kind of perspective on eating, or a historical look at eating. So a very simple thing, people nowadays, I see them come out of the supermarket and they're trolleys full of foods and foods is
packaged processed.
Yeah, packaged products. So what they've done is they've gone in and they've got food products. A very simple thing. 100 years ago, those products wouldn't exist. So, and then we're looking at a kind of a risk thing here. It's like, well, for X thousands of years, we've been eating these things called food produce. And you know, the last little while, we've been eating these products. And if you're eating something that doesn't have a long history, you're kind of taking a chance with it, right? Like, you know, they say it's safe.
But they're just saying that, right? There's a lot of stuff they pull their wolves over our eyes about.
Yeah, I think it's a very powerful perspective. Is kind of looking at risk and like a kind of a historical perspective. You know, that there have been some horrible things, even in I don't know, medicine, for example. You know, fertilizers. You go back to the 50s, all the DDT and all this kind of stuff, and thalidomide. You know, there have been these kind of real horror stories. And yeah, there are certain things that kind of concern me, I guess. I was listening to someone the other day who was talking about GMO, for example. Now, I really want to get into a specific kind of thing about GMO itself. But one of the interesting things is there was a study done on GMO grains, and they're fed to some mice, and they see the effects in the third generation.
Oh, so not immediate.
Not immediate. No, they're like the first generation. Like they ate this GMO stuff, and they were fine. They were happy as Larry. And you only see the effects after kind of 3 generations. And I think after 3 generations, like most of them were like infertile or something like this. Like a big problem. So yeah, I think that's a very powerful kind of filter. Is to you know, look at things that come from nature and avoid things that don't. You know, it's a simple filter, right? It's not 100% kind of right or wrong and all this kind of stuff.
So what about like sometimes when you eat too often, you might be a bit too full to do this type of thing. Do you suggest, because there's intermittent fasting as well, so some people have like strict times when they eat and they don't eat between. Do you suggest that?
No. This is one of the kind of dietary tribes, like, you know, you got your 16-8 and warrior and all this kind of stuff. The 5-2, you know, there's loads of different kind of approaches to intermittent fasting. I think there are a few. I think a lot of people feel a lot of benefits from intermittent fasting. I think most of the benefits are simply digestive, like you're giving the digestive system a bit of a break. Those are the kind of the benefits there. People do kind of broadly feel better, but I think there are some big problems with that. A lot of people who are doing intermittent fasting, this kind of stuff, and I would say the same thing actually when I mentioned the kind of ancestral, primal, historical approach to nutrition, evolutionary. That often gets tied in with some other things that I don't think are particularly great. Low carb, for example, you know, the whole, whether it's Atkins, whether it's keto, this kind of thing. I kind of put low carb and intermittent fasting together. I don't think they're a good idea. And we get into some kind of fairly technical reasons why.
We could probably talk about that on our next episode.
Yeah, maybe another time. Yeah, no, I don't think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, it's something to play with for sure. But I think it actually goes back to, I would say it goes back to my second point that I would make in terms of nutrition. And this goes back to what I was talking about, is connection with the body.
Yeah.
And again, the connection should also be with our food, for example. So, you know, literally like holding your food, making it yourself with your hands, this kind of thing, it gives you a sense for the kind of quantities you're eating. You know, if you had to, say you had to pick all your food, right? You had to literally go out and get it.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't overeat. Right, because you'd be like, man, okay, well, I've got enough food now, or I can carry on, and like it just doesn't make sense, right? To spend more energy than you're getting from your food, doesn't make sense. So I think there's something about a kind of embodied connection with the food. There is definitely a big thing, I think, is a whole picture of kind of stress and energy, and this is another kind of thing. Very basic evolutionary psychology, like every faculty of our mind exists for a reason. It has a history. So a big question would be, like cravings, for example. Like, why do we have cravings? Why do we think, oh man, I really like this one thing? And sometimes you got a taste for something. You want, I want something a little bit salty, or I want something a bit sweet, or this kind of thing. And I think that those exist for a reason, and they're not to be ignored.
So our body might need that at the time.
Precisely, yeah, precisely. I think that's something not to be ignored, and it's something to kind of embrace and look at and go, you know, this is what my body needs right now, and I'm going to eat that, but I'm going to do it in a smart way, right? So I'm not going to, like, I don't know, do something, you know, that maybe has kind of health problems, like pig out on X, Y, Z, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. And it just goes back to kind of connection with the body, kind of looking at, and I think stress is a huge thing. So there are some very interesting kind of connection of studies that look at stress, for example, and sugars. So one of the big things is, it turns out that ingesting sucrose brings down our stress hormones. And this is like, there are some studies, the physiology kind of shows this. And then there's a theory that essentially, you know, most people are pretty stressed, and it's just that this is a product of our current environment. You've got to drive to work, you've got a boss you hate, but you've got to make money to pay the mortgage, because, you know, and the wife and the kids, blah blah blah, you know, all this kind of stuff. So people are pretty stressed, and the paper title was like self-medication via sucrose. I think was that there's a journal article on this, and this is the kind of the theory that we've learned to kind of bring our stress hormones down by ingesting sweet things, and then like people go and do this and they overdo it and they and then they get into a cycle of this is bad for me, so I've done something bad, I've sinned.
And then they're down on themselves.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you can end up in some kind of bad places with that, versus like accepting your reality and looking at what you're doing and being like, okay, this is what I need, and I need something that's going to nourish me. Again, one of the things I kind of learned in psychology is the power of the importance of metaphor. Metaphor in our language is like a really, really huge important thing. And you know, things like clean eating, like you know, this is moral metaphor, right? You know, someone who's, there's a dirty cheat or a dirty liar or this kind of thing. Disgust, right? Disgust is very tied in with morality. And this goes back to the whole embodied kind of thing. You know, all of our thoughts are rooted in like physical experience. This idea of mental scaffolding. We're into like embodied cognition here, that we actually think through the body. So, good example of this, you know, someone's a warm person or they're a bit of a cold person, a situation is heavy, we think a lot of our language is using words that are connected to physical reality. And this kind of plays out in our bodies. There was a study I was talking about the other day, very, very simple experiment. They took people to the bottom of a hill, right? And they were asked to estimate the angle on the hill. Yeah, very simple thing.
Well, like 40 degrees,
40 degrees, 30 degrees. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what they'll do is they have two conditions. So they'll give you a sugary drink that contains energy, and they give you an artificial sweetener, so like a placebo kind of condition. And in the condition where you've had the drink that contains calories, it gives you energy, you look at the hill and people judge it as less steep. Why? Because they've got resources, they've got energy. When you've got energy, you look at the world and it doesn't look as hard. Like, it's not like, you know, you've got possibility. And then you've got this whole kind of thing about energy and metabolism and stress and kind of learned helplessness. Same thing, the intermittent fasting, similar kind of thing is, there was a study showing that people who skip breakfast spontaneously move less, right? So you see people like getting up, walking around, fidgeting, whatever, you know, you're kind of moving throughout the day. And if you skip breakfast, you move less. Now, you could say, calorie for calorie, it's the same thing. And again, this is where if your only focus is, say, weight loss, for example, you're going to have a very myopic view on nutrition, and you're going to feel lethargic, and you know you're going to be lacking in energy, and the world is going to look like hard work, and
you're going to give up, probably.
Yeah, and you're going to give up. You know, so there are kind of bigger picture things going on there. The other part of that study, it was very interesting, or the follow-up one with the hill, is to do with social support. And well, they do the same kind of thing. They're at the bottom of a hill, and if you're on your own, you think the hill's steeper than if you're with a friend. So it's about this embodied sense of resources. So, you know, if you're running up a hill and you trip over and you fall, you've got your friend to help you up. But we really kind of think in those kind of ways. And there's a whole kind of body of work there. that I think a lot of people are ignorant of. And again, it's very kind of simple. The underlying message is, pay attention to your intuitions, feel your body, all this kind of stuff. It's a very simple message, but there's a lot of kind of fairly hard science backing it up.
I think we have to do this lastly.
Yeah.
So let's say lastly, but habits, daily habits. Just give us the Jon Nicholson when he wakes up, when he goes to bed, routine. If it's not the same every day, but just give us a flavour of what you do. Is there something that you do every day?
So, I'm going to give you the horrible answer. Habits are a compulsion, and you don't want to build in habits unless you need to. That's kind of a bad answer. No, really, like we talked about, so spontaneity is like a big thing lacking. Like again, with aging, what people tend to do as they age, they become more and more routine. They're doing the same things, So I think that kind of habit thing, there's a little bit of a flip side to that. But to answer your question, the number one thing I would do goes back to the idea of connection. The number one thing that I do every day, or I try to do every day, is to simply lie on the floor. Right? It's a very simple thing, flat, hard floor, a rug or something, and just lie on the floor, close my eyes, and connect to my body, like the stuff we were talking about. And then I kind of start from there. And when I'm doing that, I kind of feel, what's going on. And this is the thing that's taken time to get to here. But I can feel, I've got some tension here, or I'm feeling stiff here, this kind of thing. And I just check in with myself. Yeah, like you could call it like a, maybe I go off into more of a kind of a meditation. Maybe, I start to move a little bit. Maybe I'm like, man, do you know what I need to do? I need to get up and like really move and get kind of, do something more physical and more full on. But that's the number one thing I would say. Like a good place to start, connect your mind and body, lie on the floor.
Part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, part of the journey. Exactly. Normally the cat comes over and jumps on me. Like, wow, we get into a little scrap. It's great. Yeah, that's what I would say. That's a big thing. And obviously from there, if you've got musculoskeletal issues that you need to address, you probably need to be doing that every day. There's some mobility work. There's things we should be doing every day anyway. You should make sure you move your body through a full range of motion all the time. Sit down, kneel, roll around, hang from something. We should be moving, we should be walking. All that kind of stuff. And there's a time to be structured about it. There is a time to use kind of formal tools to do a specific stretch, to do some strength training, to do some kind of very structured work. There's a time for that where you say, right, I've got this goal, I want to achieve this thing, or I've got this problem I need to, for me every day, I need to spend 10 minutes doing X, Y, Z. Of course that's a thing, but a bigger thing is just like move more, live in your body. Is the number one thing I'd say.
Jon.
Yeah.
Our listeners are predominantly in their 20s, 30s and 40s. What advice would you give them, as a parting shot, to say, summed all up, this is what you should really be, because they're not going to be able to focus on everything that we've said today, right? Yeah. But some key takeaway nuggets for those different age groups. If it's all the same, it's fine. If everyone in those brackets is the same, just what's your nuggets?
Okay, I'm going to give two answers. First of all, I'm going to kind of dismiss the question and say age is just a number. Okay. Well, that's kind of a bit of a corny way of saying it. There are some physical realities, but if you're engaging with a process of working with your body and your movement, there's kind of no end to improvement. You should always be learning new abilities, new skills. You might not be improving, certain kind of physical characteristics, but you can always be engaging with the process, and not kind of box yourself into a age as a kind of thing. I'm 40 now, I shouldn't be doing this. Well, guess what? You just made yourself 40, right? You just put yourself in that box, and there's only one way from there, which is decline. One of the things with aging is, I can't remember where I read this, it's a really simple thing. It's like, if you look at everything that increases with age and try to decrease it, right? you'll be anti-aging. And the same thing, if you look at everything that decreases with age and try and increase it, that's the kind of the other part of an anti-age kind of strategy. And a very obvious example of that is one's movement repertoire. So traditionally, you'd look at someone, as a young kid, and they're jumping around and bouncing around and playing around, and then someone in their 40s, they're wearing jeans that are too tight and a jacket, and they can barely move. They're only going one way, and that's less and less and less, and they're doing less and less and less and less, and eventually it's like you're doing nothing. Well, that's when you die. Or people give up a sport, or they give up this, or they stop doing that, or I'm a bit older now, this kind of thing. You're either growing or you're shrinking, as far as I'm concerned. So that's my kind of first answer. For the 20-year-olds, I would say should be fairly simple. Keep moving. Play, do lots of different things. Play sports, move around, all this kind of stuff. I guess something like that. Although, I've had some 20-year-olds through the door whose bodies are literally a disaster. I mean, just insane. It's really sad to see. I think that the kind of impact of, I guess things like computer games, this kind of stuff. You've got kids that are spending a lot of time indoors and like really not moving. And it's kind of shocking to see. I think 20-year-olds whose bodies are really in a bad place.
They're almost like 40, 50-year-old bodies.
Yeah. Oh no, exactly. Yeah. Really, really big problems. But they can work on it. That's fine. 30-year-olds, I guess. One thing I would say to probably most 30-year-olds I know, make sure that what you're doing is giving you more than it's taking from you. But you're probably not going to hammer your body in the same way that you could in your 20s. So just I see that kind of people in that age group probably hammering things a little bit too much. And kind of start to think about being a bit smarter in your training, essentially. 40-year-olds, that's the best place to be, right? 40-year-olds are the best, because there's no ego, right? You've lost whatever competitions you wanted to, that kind of competitive thing is gone. So then you're in a place to like really change yourself and move forward and like develop your movement, develop your body. You're probably not going to try and like squat more than the bro next to you and screw your back up. You're probably going to, you're a bit smarter and wiser by then. So the 40-year-olds, just bear in mind that it's all possible, that you can change your body, you can move, you can improve. And if you have a growth mindset and you have the right approach, there's definitely, there's no reason at all a 40-year-old shouldn't be like moving really well, great.
John.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. How old are you?
Oh dear, this is the $1 million question. I'm actually 40 this year.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Big 40.
Big 40, yeah. No, I've had it's funny, a few people, so many times people have been like, yeah, but when you get to my age,
you don't look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, luck. I say luck. That's
anti-aging,
kind of
man.
Yeah, there's certain things for a long time, I guess, health and lifestyle wise that I've done for a long time that probably helped. I've drunk alcohol in kind of decades for a long time, and I've been pretty physically active, and like diet, nutrition, that kind of stuff. Probably like I do think I was a vegetarian for quite a long time, and I think that was probably a positive thing. And then that's kind of changed, but it's been a big thing for a long time, like just paying attention to nutrition, that kind of thing. So obviously not smoking, blah blah blah. Still alive.
Jon Nicholson, it's been great having you on the Live Shot.
Cool, wicked. Thanks, mate.